Okay, so in order to make a plaster surface, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to use your tape to make a rigid border around the edge. You're basically making like a trough for your plaster to set in. So you're going to line it up on the edges. See how that's all like under here? Evenly. And you have to make sure it's all really tight. Otherwise, when you pour the plaster in, it's going to squish down your edges. Okay, so you get your border on there. Use the edge of something to just make sure it's really well attached. Then you're actually going to mix up some plaster, and when you're mixing your plaster, you're going to mix 1.5 parts of plaster to 1 part water. So I just took the side of this yogurt container and marked out 3 chunks because this is how much plaster I'm going to use, and then I'm going to use this much water in order to mix it up because that's about 1.5 to 1. It's, you know, it's not an exact science, but if you get it too wet, then too much of it like evaporates and it takes a really long time for it to dry and solid up. So you just mix your water into your plaster, stir it up. It's going to be maybe the consistency of like yogurt or something. And then you're going to pour it into your mold. And then you're just going to let it set up overnight. So you want to make sure you get it all mixed well. You know, if it seems so liquidy, you might want to add a little bit more plaster. And you just want to mix it until it all seems uniform. But you don't want to have too much plaster because you'll end up with an uneven surface. Okay, so once it's even, you're going to just fill up the tape. You know, and I want it to get as even as possible without overflowing. I overflowed it a little. Of course I did. Let's see. Can I move it without spilling it? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to put that over there to harden up. So that's how you do your plaster surface. Okay, number 2. Now I'm going to show you this surface. Actually, let me skip to this one that already has plaster on it, since we just did the plaster. Okay, this one has a plaster surface on it, but it's a rougher surface. I have some plaster that's already mixed up that you just take the lid off and you kind of like scrape it onto the top. So that's another way of doing that, but you don't end up with such a smooth surface, which is the smooth surface is really nice to work on. But I wanted to show you how you could work on this after you're done with the plaster. And so I just drew on this with pencil. And then you can take watercolor. And so you're going to end up with a really super absorbent surface. So you're going to be able to get really bright colors. And you're going to be able to do pen work. You're going to be able to do really kind of detailed. It's not going to work like blending like watercolor does. It's gonna look more like, I guess it'll look more like acrylic. So if you want an acrylic look, but you can't use acrylic because of the nature of the medium, you can use the watercolor and play around with different shades and colors and things like that. It's just going to end up somewhere in between acrylic and...
Are you using water at all?
Yeah, I'm using a little bit of water. Not using a lot of water. If I use a lot of water, it just kind of dissolves the plaster. So you just want to use a little bit of water. So yeah, so once you have your plaster surface, you can do a lot of different things to it as long as you're not using acrylic. You can use pen, you can use pencil. You can see how the pencil kind of smudges if you add water. So if you do add water to it, you're going to have to figure out how to deal with those smudging, which is why I went back on, you know, the little one that I showed you, this one, and I went over my lines in the, like, Techno liner. So the color is all watercolor, and then I went over it with a technical pen. Anywhere where you don't add color, it's not going to stay super white under the wax, though. It's going to have a little bit of a yellowish hue to it. So if you want it to be really white, you can use the white watercolor to kind of brighten up those areas. Okay? So there's that one. I would finish my design, and then I'll put a layer of wax on top. Which leads me back to this one that you just saw. This one, instead of having plaster, it's just a board that I taped my edges so I could have a nice even layer of gesso. And there's actually an encaustic gesso that is made just for this. Regular gesso that you would use with an acrylic paint is not going to work because it's not absorbent. So I did 2 layers of the encaustic gesso, let it dry. And then I just did a drawing with pencil and colored pencil, and I added a little yellow soft pastel because I can't handle just doing, you know, one media, even no matter how much I try. And so this one is similar to this one in that I did the drawing behind and then the layer of wax. But, you know, this one has other layers added on top. So you don't have to just stop with one layer. But if you want to have, like if you're a drawer and you want to have mostly drawn elements, and then you just want to have wax as kind of an ulterior surface that you're used to, you might want to use this. And so now I'm just evenly spreading a coat of the clear wax across the surface. And when you're doing your first coat of wax, you want to get it as even as you can. So you might have to look at like the reflection. It's going to dry or cool really quickly, so it'll firm up really quickly. So it might have a like bumps places, but you want to try and cover all of it so you can't see any of the surface without wax on that first layer. Okay. So there's my first layer of wax of the day. Now you're going to take your heat gun, you're going to turn it on low. If you turn it on too high, it'll just blow the wax right off. But you do want the heat on up high. You don't ever want to touch the silver end. If you look at it when it's not going, you'll see that it's melted because it's so hot. It's thousands, like, I don't know. It's hot. It's not a blow dryer. I don't know how hot it is. It's super hot. And you want to kind of heat gun it. Oh, you can see on the screen better than I can see in real life. See how it melts? I have to like get sideways so I can look at the reflection. Get pretty low to it, and then as it melts, it gets this like uniform surface, and all the little dimples in it go away. So you have to kind of keep it moving. The hardest part about encaustic is getting that smooth surface. So you just want to keep going until the dimples all kind of dissolve and it blends with all the wax around it. If it blows out too much, that just means it needs another layer of wax. So I'm going to let it solidify for just a few minutes. And you can see how the pencil is kind of
Look at the screen.
breaking up a little bit. Ooh, cool. So yeah, you can see how it cools also. Yeah, so you can see the pencil in it. See how it's breaking up a little bit? It's not going to keep the exact same like qualities that it has. So I'm just adding a little more to where I had a little bit less. So you can see how I put those swipes there where I had a little bit too much dimpling. And then I'm going to do it again with the heat gun. So you can see it probably better on the screen than I can even see here how I just kind of move the gun around in circles until the dimples kind of absorb and it all gets smooth and flat. Right? Can you see that?
How many layers do you use on?
What?
How many layers do you put on?
It just depends on the method. So this is just like basically a layer of wax. Even though I ended up putting a little more on just so it was even. So fun. It's like a layer of wax. So I could go back and add more at this point. All right, so there's that. In order to build up a background, because the last step I'm going to show you after this one is doing a transfer, which is like a fully realized tons of steps to it. Actually, hold on, pause, because I want to have this one. Okay, so this one I already did the background, and I got it ready for you guys to see kind of the end pieces because I don't like them until they have a bunch of layers. So this one, I did the background, and then I took a piece of paper, laid it over the top of it, and kind of sketched circles where my little blobs were. So then I could flip it over and do a design on the blobs that I wanted to add design to. When it transfers, it's going to be opposite. So it's going to look like that. Okay, so then I made a photocopy of that that will actually be my transfer. So I'm going to do that last, as I'm going to transfer that onto that. But before I do that, I wanted to add something more to it. So it wasn't just the dots and the drawing. So I'm going to add a little bit of pastel line. So I just kind of taped off. Uh-oh. Oh, that's because I zoomed in. Let's zoom back out. Okay, so I taped off. I just wanted some lines. So I'm just kind of scratching some of the pastel, and then I'm going to rub it.
This is.
Yeah, so you can rub the pastel down into the wax, and it's kind of hard to control and do evenly, which is the only reason I put the tape on. And you can't like draw right on it. It doesn't have that ability on the surface. So that's why I'm just scratching some off and kind of rubbing it into the wax, like burnishing it down into them. So after I do this, then I'm going to use it down into the surface. Okay, so I got some red. Those stripes look even and good. We're getting there. And you don't have to use your fingernail if you want to use like an X-Acto knife instead. But I have some other examples of some work that I did, some pastel on the top also. I can't open that right now, but I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to try and get that rest off so I don't get it. Would you give me a little tiny square of either tissue or paper towel? Thank you. Nope. You can't really work with wet on the wax. They're opposites somehow. Thank you. So I'm just going to rub off the part that I didn't want. And just kind of leave the pretty stripes that I did want. That look good? Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to fuse this layer.
You're just going to heat up right onto the pastel?
You have to. It's got to soak down in. No, I'm going to heat the whole surface. So, again, I got to get down low so I can see the reflection, so that it can absorb down into it. And now that I put a little bit of heat on it, I do not want to touch the surface with my fingers. You don't want to touch it unless it's cool. And you can see I got a little too much heat there. So you got to really keep it moving. It's going to spread a little bit. It's not going to stay perfect. This is like such an organic process. Like if you want to control it, you just got to give it up to the gods a little bit because it's really hard to control. It takes lots of practice. So just kind of be aware that it might do things that you don't love, and it might do things that you love as by accident. Oh, no, I'll just do that. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this in a minute. That was like a paintbrush bristle that I wanted to get rid of. Okay, so that I need to let cool off for a minute before I do the transfer. So I'm going to flip over to this. Okay, this has one layer of wax, so it's basically a base coat of wax because I wanted to build a background like I did for this one for underneath my transfer, but I just wanted to show you that beginning step also. Okay, so start with a layer of wax, use the heat gun to kind of melt it all together, and then this is the colorful part. It's pretty. Trying to think of how I did it. I'm just going to move it. I'm just going to move the hot wax over here. So you, of course, do not handle the hot wax. You're just going to leave it right on the hot plate to work. And I'm just going to start layering my color. And it's just like painting, except you have very little control. So it's not at all like painting. It's like painting with a giant brush that the paint dries almost instantaneously. So, let's see here. You'll see that like a lot of texture will build up. And then you'll see when I fuse it that it's really hard to kind of keep the texture even that's there. Okay, so you're just going to kind of see what happens. You know, you're just kind of, what?
Is that a different color?
It's a different color.
Okay.
So it was like a turquoisey, really light color, and now it's a white, and now I'm just going to do a little bit of red on top. Okay, so this is going to be my background for maybe an eventual transfer, and I probably would have done my drawing for the transfer before I did this, so I had some sort of plan going on, but not necessarily. Maybe you do it after, I don't know. You don't need a plan, but it is the background, so it would need some layers to look more interesting, because it's a little too abstract and unplanned to be amazing. Okay, you can see once it starts moving, if you don't want the wax to move very much, you got to move that gun right as it starts moving. See how it's all blending? You're trying to get that surface even. If you're doing a transfer, you got to get the surface even. If you're just doing a painting and you're just playing around with building a design, that you want to be really textury, then you don't have to worry about getting it super smooth every time. But if you want to do a transfer, you got to get it super smooth every time. Okay, I love that. It looks so pretty. So that's like a background that then I could come back to and do a transfer, which is the last thing I'm going to show you on here. I'm going to make sure this is absorbed in. I don't know if it is. I'm going to do one more little blast of heat. So when you're doing your transfer, you want to do it shortly after you've heated the surface. So if you're coming back to it, like right now I'm coming back to it after it had sat, you want to get the whole surface to be kind of like reflecting. Because that means, see how it's shining up on the overhead? Well, I can see that by putting my head like right at this layer. Oh, I'm losing that line again. It's okay. It's going to be okay, Dylan. It's okay. Maybe I'll just blow it out down there a little bit. So I just want the whole thing to be like basically warmed up. And then I'm going to make sure I have a photocopy of my design that's already planned out and ready to go on the surface. What's going to happen?
I'm so excited.
I know, right? I need one more thing. I need a spoon. Here we go. A spoon for the burnishing. Okay, so, I wonder if that's still on. Oh, it's still on. Longest video in America right there.
What?
Oh, I've been videoing this.
From where?
From this contraption.
Where's the port? Where's the hole?
There's a hole.
See-through.
There's a hole.
Oh.
Anyway, then you're going to line this up where you want it to go.
Where's the portal?
And you're going to burnish, 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 burnish wherever the photocopy. You don't want to do it straight from your design. I know, right?
If you put that paper up in it, if there's on there, I'm going to flip.
I'm not going to lift the paper. You have to use water to dissolve the paper. It's pretty fun, though. This is a very magical process. If you love magic,
If you love casting spells.
if you love casting spells and sending your enemies into oblivion, this is the process for you.
Eric loves casting spells.
So you're basically just burnishing until like you're just rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. You want to wait until it's not super hot and melty. Like if you just melted the surface like I did with this one, I would wait until it's warm but not like super soft. This one, since it had been a day before it was super melty, like I didn't really get it that melty, it's probably going to be fine. Let's hope so.
Leave it up to the gods.
I am. I'm giving it up to the gods. I might cry if it doesn't work though, so
Oh, shit.
I might. I almost cried this morning. It's better though, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I can tell. What happened? I just lost Monday. Yeah.
Somebody left some old hot chocolate in my room from the first week of school, and a little spilled this morning, and my room smelled like rotten milk. It was
awful.
terrible.
When I walked to my second
It was from the first week of school. We won't talk about who the culprits are because they're in this class right now.
culprits? I thought I was ruled out. What? Well, we already know what.
Well, we know who one isn't. We know who one it might have been. Anyway, okay, so it's burnished, burnished, burnished. What? I'm not going to point any fingers. Oh, my hand's still red. And then you're just going to...
I wonder if it will bleed red on here.
I know. Will you get me a paper towel?
See?
I know, you were right. I was wrong. I admit it. Let's move on.
So cute.
Yes, I want it wet. Because I don't want to accidentally get... I'm dissolving the paper. Thank you. So, this is similar to the transfers that we did with the tape in that you're dissolving the paper. But this time, remember, your picture is going to be opposite. So whatever you draw, it's going to transfer opposite. Look at how cute those look. Sorry, that's kind of an awful sound. Sounds so funny, huh? Another reason to do a small one. Doesn't take forever. So yeah, so now you can see I got my layers down. That red is in there. You can see it's not coming off. It's all about the layers, yeah, it's true. So I could even take the one that I did earlier with the pencil and the colored pencil underneath, which you guys can look at that if you want. But I could even do more layers on top of that. And the best part about these, when you're finished with them, you take a t-shirt and you just like buff them and then they get shiny.
What?
This is a little too rough. Somebody with a soft t-shirt, will you buff this? Will you pass this to Aiden? Thank you. It doesn't matter. If it's soft cotton, then you just rub it. It'll get shiny. I did not know that bee would be on top of that stripe. I didn't quite plan it right.
What's up with even bees?
I don't know, man. I'm having a momentary bee obsession. I apologize.
Are you just going through a bee thing right now?
I'm going through a bee phase. What? True. That's true. That's what started it. It was the inability to put a cat on my dandelions. Yeah, that is kind of a pain. So then, see, the last step with this process is you're going to just hit it with the heat gun a little tiny bit. If you get too hot, the black will break up. So you just want to kind of, I would say moisten it, but it's not really with water. It's like with heat. So you just kind of get it to the glisten. Take it to the glisten. And this is quicker if I do it over and have more water and stuff. But make sure you clean the sink out when you're done. So I'm just going to finish doing this over here. And I'll show you in a second what it looks like. If you don't burnish it enough, you'll lose some of your line.
Eric, if you would just say faster spell one time before I do today. It's case. I'm just case. Yeah. No,
Okay, so that's what it looks like now that's all been washed off. Thank you. Magic. Magic, magic. Hopefully, that didn't go off.